Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and I am on my way home from the Portland trip, and we are in Great Falls, Montana, and we're with Bob Osier, and we're going to talk about his career and whatever else he wants to talk about, and he is the first one to be on the Hog House Chronicles that is still in the military, so that might dictate what he says a little bit here and there. Who knows? You never know. Oh, there you go. Got one of those in there. So, all right. So anyway, yeah, Bob, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Whatever you want to say, as much, family, past and present, how you got interested in the military, how you actually got in, how you chose your career field, and just kind of go from there. And then we'll just listen up and see where we go.
Sounds great. Well, first off, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, coming to my home, and it just blows my mind how you set up a studio in here so fast. But that's good old Chief Bradshaw, Jimbo, mobility. You can go anywhere. As you said, my name's Bob Osier, currently in the Air National Guard. That's how we met. A little history about myself. Born back in 1972, so I'm pushing 52 years old now. I was born in Butte, Montana, or Butte, America, a lot of people call it, in Montana.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, it's Butte, America. It's where Evel Knievel's from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was his hometown. That's one of the popular things from Butte. Real deep-rooted Irish heritage there, too, and mining. Mm-hmm. That was the main thing. It was the biggest city in the state way back in the day for a long time. So, born there, 72, and then parents got divorced, like a lot of us have dealt with, in the late 70s, and moved to Helena after that, just south of here. Went through elementary there and a little junior high, and then I bounced around junior high and my high schools to 3 different high schools in the state of Montana. Helena High, and a little Bozeman High first, then Helena, and then ultimately back in Butte again.
And that's without being a military dependent.
Yeah, exactly. My parents, both my mom and dad, no military service whatsoever. Skipped a generation, basically, and we can get to that here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But ultimately ended up back in Butte, graduated there, decided to go to college, went to Montana Tech down there. It's a real popular engineering school. Did that for 2 years, and then I ended up landing a job in my early 20s and started getting enticed by that big paycheck every 2 weeks. So I actually dropped out of college after the first 2 years and did that. I worked for the corporate offices. There's these convenience stores in the state of Montana called Town Pump. And they hired me. My stepmom worked there and sort of got me an in. And I was a purchasing agent guy, it was called, and an expediter. Not to be, sort of similar to a military expediter on the flight line.
Sure. Which
you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and but to rewind a little bit to sort of set the stage for how I got interested in the military, first of all, my grandfather was in the Army Air Corps back in the early 40s. World War II time frame, before the Air Force actually became the Air Force in 1947. I got my history right?
Yeah, I think 47.
So nobody scolds me. So he was, I think he got out in 45-ish of the Air Corps. So he had shared, when he was still alive, he had shared some stories with me when I was younger. Nothing maybe truly impactful military-wise, but just I always wanted to listen to my grandfather. He was one of my favorite people growing up. And so I think that maybe set the initial spark, is just listening to him talk about being a crew chief, on the old airplanes. And then in the early 80s, my dad started getting flying lessons to become a private pilot. And I was, 10 to 12 years old, somewhere in there. So he started flying and progressed, got his pilot's license, and then I got to go up in the little Cessnas with him. So that really started to get me interested in the aviation side of things. And so I grew up flying around in Cessna 172, then 182, and ultimately started flying myself. And he had a good friend who ended up my flight instructor, my CFI, and they were always over at my dad's house and whatnot. And so my dad came to me, and that's why I had to rewind the tape here, but he said, I will pay for you to get your pilot's license, or I'll pay for your first year of college, I believe was what the deal was. And I chose to fly. So got my pilot's license, private pilot's license. I soloed in like 2 or 3 hours, just because I had been flying for so many years with my dad.
Right.
So it didn't take me long to solo. Ultimately got my pilot's license in the minimum time, like 40 hours. It was my senior year of high school when I got my pilot's license. I was still in school, hadn't graduated yet. So, and actually in my senior yearbook, they would go around the yearbook committee or whatever and ask, hey, what are you going to do with your life? And ask you those kind of questions. And I just was looking at the yearbook like a couple months ago because my wife put them downstairs in a little bookcase thing, and what I had answered is I plan to pursue my career in aviation, which is funny because after I quit college, went into that job I told you about, and was feeding off the money and the paycheck, and I had sort of quit flying and whatnot. Then I got back into it a little bit, but anyhow, still no military. But I did plan I wanted to, Air Force was on my radar, active duty, to join right out of high school. But that job sort of steered me away from that a little bit. But it was on my radar. And I had known at the time of the Air Force base up here in Great Falls, and they had KC-135 tankers at the time. But fast forward, I worked that job, and my dad he worked for the Montana Power Company for a long time, which is now called Northwestern Energy here in Montana. But he took a gamble and cashed in. He basically resigned from that job. And I mean, this was like a union, public utility company that, he had a good retirement coming. And he took a gamble to start his own business, and basically resigned, did that, started a business basically doing safety inspections back to the company. It's OSHA safety inspections and non-destructive NDI, you know what NDI is.
Right.
So he did that and ultimately grew the company. It never got huge or anything, but it got big enough to where he could hire me. So he asked me if I wanted to go to work for him. And then at that time, I was about probably 25-ish. And started to go work for him, traveling around the state, inspecting all these bucket trucks and cranes and all this stuff, doing safety inspections and NDI on them. And the summer of 2000, come to Great Falls because there's a big state fair here every year, and go to the fair. And there's an F-16 parked on the grass right when you walk into, you pay your dues to get into the fair, and there's this F-16 sitting there. And I know what an F-16 is because I was in such an enthusiast as a pilot, a private pilot. But, and of course, Top Gun came out in 1984. Or whatever,
Sure.
So, it was a cool thing. And I'm like, why is there an F-16 in Great Falls, Montana? Because I knew about the active duty base with the tankers. So I'm 28 years old. I'm like, I got to find out why this F-16. I just got to go check it out. So walk over there. At the time, there was a pilot, a major, and an enlisted female there. Because, now I know because I've been in the Guard for 23 years. But, we volunteer to go to those things and talk our story, to explain who we are and what we are, and potentially get people to enlist and recruit them. So they start telling me about the Montana Air National Guard, and I'd never heard of it. I've been in Montana my whole life, 28 years.
It's pretty common. There's a lot of people in Sioux Falls that don't know there's an Air Guard right in their town.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? Yeah, we were up at the airport, and we fly F-16s. I'm like, really? And so, that dialogue started, and one thing led to another. So that was August, and I ended up coming back up here because they invited me, to come back up and check out the base. And I already knew I couldn't be a pilot, fly them, because my eyes were too bad at that time. And it was before I think they were allowing that laser corrective surgery for pilots, which they do now. Go up there, and I believe it was the next month. It was either September, October. And obviously it hooked me up with a recruiter, and my recruiter, she took me around all over the base and checking out all the shops, and took the ASVAB. I can't remember when I took the ASVAB, but I took that, and I think based on the scores, they wanted, they took you to certain places first.
Right.
But that's what's great about the Guard is, I can't speak to the active duty because I don't have any prior active duty. I'm a Guard baby since day one. So I didn't join and then transfer over. But they took me to the flight line where all the crew chiefs are at. They took me to avionics. And I know it was sort of based on the scores and, where they had some needs to fill. Then we end up down in ops and roll into the life support shop. And there's all these fighter pilots and all this cool stuff, and oxygen masks, night vision, G-suits, and all the pilots are rolling in and rolling out the whole time I'm there, and stepping and launching in F-16s. I'm like, yeah, this is where I need to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something to that excitement.
And I didn't want to do the same thing that I was doing in my civilian career at the time, which militarily would have been NDI, because we went to the NDI shop too, because I was already actually certified in 4 different methods of NDI before I even joined the military.
Non-destructive
inspection. Yeah. So we did go to that shop. I remember that, but I just wanted to do something different. And then just knowing I could be around the pilots and help, inspect their gear and take care of their stuff. And at the time, I didn't know how involved life support was. I just got the surface treatment.
Right.
Next thing you know, I enlisted on the 5th of November, 2000, the next month, and been in the Guard ever since. But I was a drill status guardsman for 2 years, and then became full-time, and I've been full-time ever since. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of us that went in active duty, we got to choose by reading like 5-sentence paragraph. That was it to make your decisions.
Of what the career field was.
Yeah, because I've said it before in a previous podcast that once they put my code 3 color vision in, which is bad my list of jobs went from this big to about this big.
Oh, yeah.
On a green computer screen. There was actually a computer back then. But,
and life support was one of the, you could be colorblind.
Yeah, there was only like administrative type jobs and that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's in a nutshell how it happened. Did the weekend thing, driving back and forth from Butte to Great Falls once a month, and then ultimately a job opened, a full-time technician job in the life support shop, and the business that I was. Oh, in that time frame, I had bought the business from my dad, by the way. So
you did?
Yeah, so I actually own the business now, and he didn't retire. He sort of went on. He tried to go down a different road and do some other stuff with the business, got in some woodworking stuff and some different things. So I had bought it from him and hired a guy that was working with me at the time while I was a guardsman for 2 years. And it took us all over. I mean, I was traveling the state of Montana, Idaho, a little bit in Wyoming. I got into North Dakota once, but didn't get down to South Dakota, just for all these companies that were clientele, inspecting their equipment. And it just got a little old, traveling every week. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to go for this, because I enjoyed going to the Guard all the time, being around the airplanes. So applied and ultimately got hired. And December 2002, I started. Lived in a little camp trailer down in the RV park down here in the wintertime.
Oh, wow.
That was an experience until I found some place to live up here.
Yeah, northern Montana in the wintertime in an RV.
The showers were a little cold. I tried that out a couple days and decided the shower at work from that day forward.
Yeah. And then I remember the first time I heard your name. I was the supervisor in my shop for about 3 years by then. I was not a weapons system team chief yet for the Guard Bureau. And Chief Snyder was down at St. Louis with the F-15s at the time. Yeah. And you had performed well enough to be put in for Airman of the Year for the whole Guard.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that?
That's right.
Weren't you a senior airman?
I was a senior airman, at the time. And I was an older senior, because I didn't join the military and start my career in the military till I was 28. I was 10 years behind.
Yeah, that's unusual.
Yeah.
But shops like to get those people because they know they're probably matured pretty well and want to be there for sure.
Right, right. And ultimately made a decision to leave a career you already had to do this instead. You didn't. Yeah, it was. So Chief Schneider, Jeff, he had come to our shop to do a salve prior to, I think it was a UCI we were having.
Yeah, staff assistance visit.
Yep. So Jeff and Paul Carney, who worked with him out there in St. Louis, came to Montana and basically, turned our shop upside down, to checked everything from top to bottom. And that's how I originally met him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I remember Jeff got a little upset because I don't remember if that's when some of the fiscal things were starting to hit the military. Not quite yet, but for some reason, they didn't get you to DC or wherever they were going to be to hand that to you in person. And just like, this young man is not going to receive this at his home unit. So he made sure that National Guard Bureau probably funded it, but got you to the next conference.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that you could be presented that properly.
That's exactly right. You're right. That is what happened. It ended up in, I think it was a conference we had in Orlando that year, maybe?
Yeah, I think we had 2 in a row down there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think it was Orlando. And that was the very first time I got to go to a life support conference. It was my first one. And met some folks there. And, that was an experience. I had forgotten about that. But you're right, that he did sort of drive that initiative to get me down there and to fund me to go down there, or however that worked out. Yeah.
I think was it Warren Schiffer and Lori Olson working
Yep.
in the shop when you went in there?
Yeah, Warren was in there.
I tried to think of his name all morning.
Yeah.
I just thought of it now.
So it was a
Can't
funny
believe it.
story. Warren, so when I first joined, he wasn't the superintendent of the
he wasn't
shop.
yet?
No, it was a guy, his nickname was Bull, and had been doing it for quite a long time. And at that time, as you and several others, who've been in the career field know, that we weren't merged yet. Parachute shop was still under maintenance.
Yeah, that was 2008-ish.
So there's a maintenance supervisor, the parachute shop on that side, and then Bull on the life support side. And then the first time they tried to merge our career field, I mean, I think it ultimately stayed merged. But remember that the first hack at it, and they came up with a different name. It was Aircrew Protection or something.
Element or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that.
It was kind of like who owned your shop, the military side of the, technician side, and
it was administratively
yeah,
getting merged, but not operationally.
took
I
a
guess.
couple tries.
Yeah. So at that time, at that initial administrative merge that the Air Force was doing, Bull, and then the supervisor of the parachute, they butted heads pretty hard.
Which would be pretty normal because the military is putting you in a hard situation.
Sure. Yeah,
not a bad one, but a hard one.
So what ultimately ended up happening is they decided not to bring either of them in as the new supervisor of the merged career field, but they brought Warren in because he was already up there. And he had a life support AFSC from Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
That's the reason why.
Really?
He was able to, at that time, yeah. So because he was in a different job. He was like the base training manager or something.
And you guys had F-16s at that time?
We were F-16s at that time, yeah.
And just 2 podcasts before this, it was with Pat Tracy, and he was talking about the ADF units, Air Defense Forces, or whatever that stood for. I can't remember what
that's what it is. That's basically what we started as, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys were that, but then as the base realignment and closure was happening, things were consolidating, money was an issue. They were converting your unit to a general purpose unit.
Correct.
Which I'd mentioned is instead of just dogfighting and defending the nation's borders, you could drop bombs air to ground, do that. But then you had to get into the aircrew chemical defense world.
Right.
Because you did not have aircrew chem equipment for ADF. So Lori and another guy, I can't remember, they came down to start learning those things. And that's when I got to know more people in your unit.
That's right.
During that
because you
time
guys were already a GP unit. Yeah,
right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it started with the chem defense. Yeah. I think that's when I met you, maybe.
Probably.
Was for that.
Yeah.
Before the team chief or any of that. It was for something like that.
Yeah, team chief wasn't until late 04.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I might have brought some folks up to, after Lori's visit down to us, might have come up to Montana and helped out hands-on, doing some of the conversion and things.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were in the F-16 A's, which was that, like you said, air defense, and then went to the C models and started dropping bombs. And then, I basically progressed in the shop fairly quickly, I guess you could say, and it was a timing thing. Warren, he had retired, and then Lori, who you had met, she stepped up and ran the shop for a while, and then she actually she retired, and I became the NCOIC when she took over the shop. She chose me to be the NCOIC at that time, and then.
So it's more than timing. You were proving yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty driven, just doing the JOB and wanting to do the best I could. And
Learn everything you could from the regulations.
and I was the one that they seemed like they sent everywhere to get the training and come back and train everybody else, you know, be it chem defense or later on when we got into, you know, helmet mounted queuing systems and stuff like that.
Calling that train the trainer.
Yep, train the trainer, yep. Yep, so I got to bounce around a little bit and go to some different shops and units, and fairly early in my career, which was pretty cool. Best part's just meeting the people, though.
Yeah. Then you had an aircraft change.
Yeah, so BRAC happened.
Base realignment and
Base
closure.
realignment and closure.
Lost a lot of units.
Oh, yeah.
Especially 16 units.
And back then, it just seemed to be really just put people on edge, especially in the Guard. I mean, it was... so we had the F-16s, and initially, when the BRAC got released... So the previous BRAC to that is what shut down the tankers out at Malmstrom across town here. And they lost their tankers and lost their flying mission, and that's when they became the, you know, missile base. So then the next BRAC, we got affected by that, and we're supposed to lose our F-16s, and no follow-on flying mission either, initially.
So there was a gap there.
Well, when it was announced, yeah,
On paper.
they had no flying mission for us, and we were going to be. I mean, initially when it was communicated to us and it came down, we were going to potentially become one of those. I can't remember even the term for it. I'll think of it, but you're basically a Guard unit that's not flying, but you're ready in a lot of different support areas to deploy downrange and support the expeditionary wings. But, you know, as you well know, and many others do, I mean, politics get involved and different things happen, and they take things back to the table, and next thing you know, we're getting F-15s. Staying in fighters and getting F-15s. It's funny because when we get to the current airframe we fly, which we'll get to here shortly, but yeah, another conversion. But there was talk of that becoming, you know, a C-130 unit then, before the F-15s. But one thing led to another, and I mean, I know a lot of things happened at some very high levels, and ultimately a decision was made to convert us to F-15s. And along with that, that same BRAC, yeah, if I recall, that's when Chief Schneider's F-15 unit was losing their F-15s.
Right.
During the same BRAC, and how their whole unit out there at St. Louis ultimately ended up in Whiteman, you know, with the TFI and the B-2s.
Yep. First Guards involved with the B-2.
Yep. And I think we got some of St. Louis's jets, if I recall. They when you do that, which you know, you get jets from multiple different units. Some came from Korea, and some came from, I think we did get a few of St. Louis's, but
Yeah, they just try to get your numbers up wherever they can get them.
so switching to the F-15, you know, wasn't too bad. I was the NCOIC, and then, I mean, I should have got my last job application out to look at I don't have all the years aligned perfectly and memorized. But,
Yeah, that's fine.
But there,
It don't matter.
there was, during that time is when Lori retired in there, when we started getting the F-15 somewhere. And that's when I became the superintendent of the shop, you know, applied and got it. And we started getting all the F-15s. Took a trip out to St. Louis and got spun up on the Joint Helmet Mounted Queuing System, JHMX. And because that was a big new thing we had never seen before, that the F-15 had, that none of our Vipers had. Viper's a nickname for F-16. Yeah, got the F-15s on the ramp and started flying those. That was fun. At least it stayed fighters. I
Right.
was happy about that.
And physically, they're a much bigger jet than
Very
the
big.
16.
Yep.
Remember my first time standing next to a 15, I was like, man, this thing's huge. Of course, it has 2 engines,
Yep.
and the 16 has 1.
Yep.
Of course, we'd go back and forth with the St. Louis guys on, 16s only having 1 engine, but we sent them a picture of 2 F-16s, and on the bottom it said the most combat effective use of 2 engines. Took a while to hear back from that one, but
It's so
they
funny.
got us
It's
back.
so funny how that happens within the community. People making, and they're calling the F-16s lawn darts and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Good
but-
guys down there, a lot of experience.
The F-15s were cool. I'll still always be an F-16 guy, though. I think it's just what I cut my teeth on when I first joined, and I love that airplane, and got to fly in it 3 times.
Oh, nice. Same here.
Yeah, I mean and after you experience that kind of stuff, it's just it'll always be my favorite airplane. I never did get to fly in the F-15 though. I made sure I got the rest of my crew some flights.
Yep.
The younger folks.
That's a good supervisor there.
Yeah. They got to go up and do that and get some orientation in it. But yeah, so flew the F-15s, did the superintendent job, and I honestly can't even remember how that's when I met Pat Tracy, where you were just out in Portland. It's because he was the F-15 team chief. And he came out to do a staff assistant visit on our shop after we got set up with the Eagles, and that's how I got to meet Pat and build that relationship. And
We didn't mention on Pat's podcast, he's been dubbed Bigfoot. We'll get that.
Yeah.
We'll get that on recorded here.
yeah, you'll have to put some pictures of the Bigfoot stuff in there.
Oh,
from
yeah, we
last
can do
night.
that.
Yeah, you'll have to. Yeah,
A lot of us haven't seen each other for years, so we're just really enjoying being together again.
It has been a while. So Pat came out with Buzz, Dave West. Remember him? Good dude from England.
Yeah,
He's a funny guy.
he is
man.
funny.
I love that guy. I always love that guy. And did that salve for us, and I met Pat, and we hit it off really well. And then I don't know how it came out. He needed you were a team chief at the time.
For the
is that when they
16s?
started doing the assistant ones, that you guys needed more people or something?
Well, I became it in about 2004, late 2004, and we had a lot of F-16 units in the Guard, and they got knocked down to just under half as many. And there weren't as many F-15 and A-10 units, so they got shuffled around a little bit, onesie, twosie, but the 16s lost a lot. I won't say how many, but it did change a lot of things.
Yep.
But there was no assistant at that time. And when the base realignment and closure came around, I was trying to help manage all the equipment movals from place to place because there's a lot of equipment in our shop, as you know. So that was pretty difficult doing that. And then we started doing the staff assistance visits more often after that kind of thing. So, but we still had a couple training F-16 units in the Guard at that time. But operational units, we became more like the Air Force. And, at the high level, which we're going to get to on that in his career, the high level, they wanted to show the Air Force that we could do it.
Yep.
And we knew we could do it. We had a lot of experience. We have a lot of older guys and gals that are in the Guard, a lot later in life than active duty. So a lot of experience. But you have some high-ranking people out there still kicking tires and launching jets, where they could have 2 or 3 stripes more than your average Air Force person out there doing the same job. That kind of freaks them out when you go to an active duty base and they see that. But there's a lot of experience there, a lot of turmoil with the reduction of units, the movement of equipment, and then we get inspected by the Air Force, and that's why we did a lot of the staff assistance visits. A lot of them, some of them were for the conversions like what you went through. But then more so after that, it was to make sure that we could pass the inspections. And we all helped each other a lot. We were a pretty tight family in the AFE career field.
Oh, yeah.
In 2008, we merged with the parachute shop, and it all came under ops, which is operations. And it seemed to me like some of the inspections got tougher. The regulations were getting bigger, and it was getting harder to keep up because we had fewer people in our shops than active duty had, but they would train young persons and then they would move on more often. So they had that dynamic. So we each had our own different dynamics, but just trying to stay in compliance was a struggle.
Yeah, I agree. It was a difficult time. I've always taken the position on this subject of the merger. I mean, I think life support, because our leaders we worked for the pilots and all the officers in the fighter units, and they just continue to progress all the way up and end up at headquarters Air Force, and a lot of, as you well know, they're all pilots that run the Air Force for the most part. I think they had so much faith in totality and life support to get the job done because of how we always operated. They were like, hey man, I know that you guys can get this done. Because if you recall, they never created a new school or a shred for prior life supporters to go get trained and vice versa. They sort of did as time went on, but it up front it didn't. We were just expected to train ourselves, remember?
On the job training.
Yeah, and
from the qualified people.
I think that, and anybody that's got that experience, which I know our core of all of us that were in the Guard AFE, especially fighters, we knew how right up front how hard that was. It's like we knew that, hey man, if this was maintenance, they wouldn't have done it this way. They would have stood up a school or something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
They're a little better about being official.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is like taking care of the airmen a little bit better instead of throwing you out there. But like you said, we were given the trust.
I think that was.
But also it kind of throws you in the fire from the frying
and there's
pan.
always and there's always the fiscal constraints too. Money.
Right.
But I think part of it was that. I think part of it was they had so much trust in life support they thought it would just be fine initially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there were some difficulties after the merger, and units started getting more write-ups during inspections and things. But prior to that, I had multiple ops group commanders, because like you said, they advanced through. I don't know, I might have worked for like 8 different guys, even just through the supervisor era. And most of the time they'd be like, we don't come in with your shop. We've got trust in you. We know you've got it.
Yeah.
That slowly eroded with the merger because it ended up being just too much for people to learn and stay proficient on everything. Our training records were just growing like crazy with the number of things that you had to be signed off on. But they're getting through it. Yeah. But it wears you down.
It did. Yeah. But we ultimately got through it. That's what matters the most.
Right. So you went from 16s to 15s and then to C-130s, which is what you have now.
Yeah. So in that time frame after that SAV, I think that SAV was right before we declared IOC. It was somewhere in there, interim operational capability, when you're done converting and you can raise your hand and say, hey, we can do the mission for real now. I got married in that time frame, by the way. It was right in that time period where my wife JD and I got married in 2007, so it was in there. And then I ended up a assistant team chief for Pat. I just can't remember how. I think he just emailed me or something because they wanted a bigger core.
And at that time, there was really no gain monetarily or
No, it was
anything.
it's voluntary.
It was
stuff.
voluntary.
Yeah. And I thought on that a little bit because I was a fairly new superintendent, a new airframe, and but I had been in it for a little bit, and also obviously in the CAF fighter, community. So, but I ultimately, said, yeah, I'll help out. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, did that. But then, it ended up C-130s showed up in Great Falls. So they did another realignment of guard units, and that was when I was gone. I was out in D.C. when our first C-130 showed up. So when I left here to go out to D.C., we still had Eagles.
Right. And Chief Snyder hired you?
Yeah.
Out there?
Yep.
Yeah, so Chief Snyder from St. Louis, they lost their F-16s, went over to Whiteman to be with B-2s, and Chief Snyder got hired as a career field functional manager at the National Guard Bureau in D.C. And then there's a functional area manager that works. So there's basically two people at NGB that were responsible for 92 Air Guard wings. Because in that setup, you're in charge of, fighters, rescue, bombers, heavy,
right?
Everybody, rescue. I guess I mentioned that. But on the Air Force side, they would have their, the fighter guys, ACC, the heavy guys. So they had a little bit more manning to handle all the issues. And that's why I had explained it on an earlier podcast that the Guard Bureau had like 13 chief stripes that were floaters. And so that's when they started getting into officially having the assistant team chiefs, where there was, a couple of them for the 16s because of their numbers. The heavies, they started out having assistants because they had more airplanes, basically, or more equipment itself than the fighters. So then Chief Snyder, having met you first as a senior airman with the Airman of the Year and had stayed in touch with you and got to know you better, ended up hiring you at the National Guard Bureau.
Yeah.
So you had your hand in the strategic level of the Air Guard and the Air Force, and explain that experience and how long you were there.
Yeah. So that was, Chief Schneider, I believe it was a phone call. I think it was even on a weekend, if I recall. And he put the bug in my ear about it, that I had known that he went out there and started. And I think he'd been out there for not quite a year, if I recall. And they were hiring the second position because the person that was in that at the time was getting ready to go back to their home unit, because it's called a statutory tour when you go out and work at headquarters in the Guard. It's called a stat tour. So he put the bug in my ear that the job was coming up, and I hemmed and hawed. He sent me the info, or I actually went out to the website and looked at it, and I hemmed and hawed on it for a little while and talked to the wife. And
just moving to the D.C. area,
right.
As
I'm a
decision,
Montana kid, and
let alone the job.
Right, and at that time, we had our first child, my daughter Taya, and she was only 2 years old when this. So she's really young, and in all those talks and everything, we're like, if there's ever a time we're going to do it, it's probably right now is the best time because, if my daughter would have been older in school already or something, I probably wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have wanted to pull her out of school and move. But it just seemed like the right opportunity, right time. And we just decided to, let's go for it. So, put my package together, applied. There were some other applicants. I can't remember how many. But, I actually flew out there to interview because I was I had a passion, I guess, to do it, after I thought about it more and more and more and more. And I flew out because you can do a phone interview for those jobs, especially when you live cross country like I did. But I flew out, interviewed, checked out the area. It was an experience. First time to the National Capital Region out there. It's whoa, this is pretty wild.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Everybody needs to get out there.
I mean, your first times like that, because I had been to a couple big cities, obviously, but not something like that. But it captured my interest though, because every year I get older, I just care about history more and more and more. So it was cool because everything out there is so much older than here in Montana, So interviewed, checked some stuff out. JD actually flew out there with me. So while I was interviewing, and she was out driving around, checking out some cities where, if I do get the job, where we could live, or where she would like to live. And then we came back. Funny story though, my brother was already out there when I interviewed. He got a stat tour.
Oh, he did?
Before I did, yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, so he was already there, so I got a crash at his house. It was nice. But he ended up out there, let's see, it was July of 2012 when I went out there. So he went out there maybe a year before that, not quite a year before that. But he was on the recruiting side. Yeah, my brother, he's in the guard with me still up at the unit. There's a story I'll tell you about that too. But he ended up going out there and being in the recruiting for the guard. Before me, I get out there. So I get selected, and we go out and just go through the whole PCS thing from here to Montana. I mean, it was a big deal to us, sort of. It was my first time doing any of that because I had no active duty experience.
Right.
So I didn't know anything. But it actually went pretty smooth. Went across the country, saw you on the way. Remember that? Yeah. Yeah,
we were on a horseback trip with the guys.
Yeah.
The one we're doing that. We've done that 27 years in a row at this point.
Yeah.
But you stopped out with your family and visited with us in the Black Hills of South Dakota.
That's right.
That was cool.
That was fun.
I knew you were on your way to an adventure.
Yeah. You're like, thanks. I'm
so
staying
technically,
here.
Were you my boss then? After you went out?
Chief Bradshaw. Nobody's your boss.
I worked for Bob Osier.
Yeah. Right.
Couldn't find a better guy.
So
you and Chief Snyder, I will say, were a heck of a team out there. I think you guys got
it was
a ton of stuff done. It's hard to say more than anybody else, but I could probably put $10 on the table and win that bet. You guys were a great team out there.
Yeah, and him and I had discussions when I got out there, and, I got to know his visions that he had more, and, I'm the number 2 guy, and I'm there to help him attain those visions with the ultimate responsibility of running the career field for the entire guard. And just doing it with 2 people, it was a challenge. Like you alluded to, active duty, just at headquarters level, they just have a lot more manpower. But we couldn't have done any of it without the team chiefs. You guys, there's no way. But yeah, I get out there, had to wear blues every day and all this stuff. I'm like, oh man, what did I do?
Locked in the safe.
Yeah,
every
locked
day,
in
no
a
windows.
skiff, and wearing blues every day. But there's a bright side of that. We finally got to stop wearing our blues the last year or 2 I was there. But primary reason for that, by the way, if you don't know, is because any given time you can get a call to go to the Pentagon. You have to be. That's why.
Right.
But so yeah, I get out there. Fighter guy. Then when Jeff gets out there, fighter guy primarily, and he had already, though, been there a while and got up to speed on all the mobility aircraft side of stuff. And I'll tell you what, aside from all the people I got to meet in the AFE community nationwide. That was probably the biggest nugget that I'll always cherish is all the people I met. So many good people, you know, and secondary to that was just having to take these blinders, you know, that are right here and go like this. Because if you're not able to do that, you're not going to be very successful in a position like that, because you have to be able to soak it all in and be able to help the entire enterprise, not just, you know, stay in that fighter calf lane. And so learning
Can't be playing favorites.
No, and it's no, you really have to broaden your scope. And I mean, I had that ability, I think, but when I went out there, I mean, it really tuned me into, man. I mean, it was a big learning experience, bottom line, and learning all the mobility, MAF side of stuff, the special tactics and rescue stuff that even up to that point, I hardly had any idea the Guard had that capability before I went out there. Amazing. Just learning all the capabilities that the Air National Guard has. Yeah.
Yeah, my oldest daughter lives in Anchorage, and my first time I flew up there to see her, I went out to the Air Guard up there that's on the air base, J-Bear.
Yep.
And I got a tour through their rescue and special operations area, and I was just blown away, not only with the capabilities, which we won't go through any of that, but the mobility package that goes along with those capabilities.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, they're prepared for military and civilian issues.
Yep.
I was just totally blown away at what they had up there.
Definitely opens your eyes. Yeah. Definitely opens your eyes. So yeah, we went out there and we decided to actually bed down in Annapolis, Maryland is where we lived. Because headquarters Air National Guard is on Andrews Air Force, Joint Base Andrews Air Force Base, not technically at the Pentagon, you know, but
right.
And Annapolis was, I don't know, it was 40 to 45 minutes door to door. So there was an acclimation period there with the commuting and everything. But I wanted my wife and my daughter, I wanted them to be in a spot where they were comfortable. So that's where and it ended up great because we were able to use the Naval Academy military stuff instead of the Air Force Base stuff. So yeah, did that. I did that for 4 years though, 2012 through 2016. And it was a heck of a ride. I would do it all over again if I was put in the same position. I wouldn't do it now, but
right.
I mean, if I were to rewind, I mean, I would have done the same thing that I did. So it was great experience.
So like I said, Stat 2 is meant to go out there, do what you can to help, learn what you can, go back to your home unit and work at that unit with that gain of knowledge and help that unit as well. That's the theory behind that of going out to DC and coming back.
Take that knowledge and that experience and bring it back to the wing level and help implement it, or like you said, educate or mentor others that don't get the opportunity to do it. And it makes them, you know, smarter, more capable airmen, you know.
Right.
And it gives them that understanding of why. That's the biggest thing. When you can work with somebody that's been at headquarters for a while and they go back to the wing. That first probably year and a half I was back at the wing, I was just sharing the why. Because, you know, people get in a rut and they're like, why do I have to do this? Or why is it this way? Or why don't they do this instead?
Right.
You know, and just explaining to them the whys and some of the reasons behind why that process is this way or whatever, it helps them understand. Oh, you know.
And to make things clear, when you go back to your unit, you aren't necessarily guaranteed your old job back.
That's correct.
But your unit did it so that you could have, and they hired somebody in a temporary position for that. But to your credit and your character, when Bob went back to his unit, he did not take that position back and have that person drop back down to where they were. I know there's a lot of people, that our phone calls that went around were like, man, that's a class act from Bob Osier. So
Yeah.
did you actually start working for him and Wrench Turner?
Yeah. So
until other opportunities came up?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was when I was out at NGB, they had hired a friend of ours, Reagan Robertson, to run the shop when I left, and still in fighters. But then when the conversion took place, there was an opportunity for a lot of people at the wing to cross-train into new career fields, because obviously the air crew footprint just expands with C-130s, especially the H models. So he decided to cross-train and become a loadmaster. So then they hired another good friend of mine that I grew up with in life support. He was there first day I ever went into the shop. He was in life support already. And he ultimately came back to the Guard full-time, because he was off and on full-time in the Guard over his career. And so he was running the shop at the time when I came back. And I was in communication with my leadership in front of coming back. Our ops group commander at the time, and and I had shared with them, I'm willing to, broaden my career. I don't necessarily have to go back to the same job I left, and if there's other opportunities, I'm open to that. So yeah, but they couldn't, as you well know, being in a Guard unit they couldn't. It's not the easiest situation to find you. They have to give you a full-time job back, but it can be anywhere. But it sort of worked out, because there was a temporary active Guard reserve position in the AFE shop that was good for like 3 years. That was open, happened to be open and not filled by anybody in the AFE shop. And he said, hey, why don't you just let come back. We'll put you in back in the AFE shop as a temp AGR, and we'll figure it out. Because there was like a year and a half left on that manning position. So that's what I ended up. I came back to the shop, but not as a boss anymore, but as it worked out good though, because him and I knew each other well, and for all those years, and I sort of got thrown in the QA position, and there was a young shop in there, a bunch of people I didn't know. They weren't there when I left.
I figured it'd give you a chance to decompress a little as well.
Yeah, it did. It did help with that a little bit, because it's something I know already, and I could decompress and get back in my groove in Montana a little bit, So yeah, I did that. I came back, was in the AFE shop for a year and a half. And then that position funding ran out, and they had to put me back. They had to put me somewhere. So I got a phone call from my boss at the time, the group commander at the time, and hey, I need you in my office at whatever time it was, Monday morning, and went up there, and he and another squadron commander were in there, and they basically presented an offer to me, you could call it. I mean, it was probably the only offer available at the time, just because of how the manning works. But it was the same grade and everything that I had originally left, and they said, we want you to do this. And it was in the 4 Support Squadron. It was the base services manager position in services, and I'm like, whoa, okay. Totally didn't think that was my wheelhouse,
right?
As I grew up and all this stuff, and I'm like, services, okay, yeah, I know who runs that right now. Got a tremendous respect for the chief that currently runs that. I'm like, okay, all right. And one thing led to another, and I got to go into services. Yeah. That was another learning experience.
Yep. More gain experience. Yeah. Then you moved on, One more time?
One more time, yeah. So now I did that for 3 years, and now then the opportunity came about that the occupational safety manager position came open in the wing safety office, and I decided to go after that and interviewed and ultimately got hired for that job. So I've been doing that. Had to go to tech school again. Got back from tech school, safety tech school, March of 21, I believe.
Back into safety.
Back into
right
safety,
where it all
right?
began.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Funny story is though the other safety colleague in my office that I work with was in my life support shop too.
Really?
Yep. So both of us are prior life support.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and Reagan Robertson would have been on here with us if he would have agreed.
Yeah.
But he's a loadmaster for 130s, and he got called off to a trip, so he left probably yesterday, I think. He's going to be gone for a week, so I was bummed I didn't get to see him.
Yeah, flying all over all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to have him around too.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now, safety, and it's good. It's good. It's the new stuff though. I mean, it's not. I'm responsible more for the ground and explosive weapons type safety than the flight safety that
Right.
all of us have that experience in.
Yep.
But it's a position where you got to know the flight safety stuff too, because you're supporting the chief of safety. And, the chief of safeties are all pilots usually, or in the C-130, it can be a navigator too. They have to be rated.
Right.
But when they're pilots or they're always flying too. Got to keep those sorties going, and they got to call them out and fly them. So
Right.
yeah.
Cool. Let's step back a second, and you said something about your brother, and you had a story.
Oh,
To tell
yeah,
your brother?
yeah. It's so that I had joined when I think I was full time. Yeah, I had just gotten full time, I think. So I was a guardsman for those first 2 years, and I think I had just moved up here. I might have not been living in the little camp trailer at the time. I might have had the apartment by then, but I can't remember if it was him or my mom that called, and it might have been my mom, just the way my mom is. She's like, Bobby, Josh's going to join the Army. I'm like, what? Yeah, he's been talking to these recruiter guys, and he's going to... She was just concerned. She likes to vet things a little bit. She's
Right.
she's the mom, and I think she had some concerns with him going in the active duty Army at the time. And because if everybody remembers what happened in 2001, right? September 11th. And that happened when I was in tech school, actually, for life support. But she calls in, and I'm like, okay. So I call my brother. I'm like, hey, man. He just graduated high school at this time. And he's 18 or whatever. And I said, what are you doing? Oh, yeah. And he explained it to me. I don't remember all the details. He's like, yeah, I think I'm going down there. I'm like, to sign the papers? And I'm like, no, you're not. You're coming with me to Great Falls, Montana, and I'm going to show you something. Because he had never been up here.
Yeah, he's got to be exposed to it.
Right. And even at that time, if I recall, they weren't really advertising the Guard that much. Because it was only like a year or two after I had joined, and I knew nothing about it growing up. I mean, that's all changed nowadays.
Right.
But at that time, it was sort of like they never had problems, I guess, is the thing. They always had enough people, and recruiting was always good back then. But I said, no, you're coming up to Great Falls to do a guard drill or to shadow me, and I'm going to show you around. And I'm going to introduce you to some people, and I'm not letting you join the active duty Army right now. And nothing against the Army, it's not that. It's just I knew, even at that time, he's my youngest brother. I have 3, so there's 4 boys. Thanks, Mom. You're an angel. But I drug him up here and introduced him to some folks, and next thing you know, he joined the Air National Guard instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has he ever thanked you for that?
Yeah.
Nonchalantly, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that brotherly way, I think. Yeah, he's brought the story up before with other people, so that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I saved him or something, but
Right.
I just knew I knew he was capable, and I knew that our guard unit could benefit from having him in it,
Right.
because he's a different personality than I am, totally different person than me, and you need that diversity. And I just thought he'd be a good fit, and sure as heck, yeah, he's well respected up there right now. Yeah,
Good.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
So you had 16s, 15s, 130s. Did you get to travel much at the time you were involved in each aircraft, or any overseas stuff? Or?
Yeah. When we were in F-16s, I deployed to Iraq. We were at that time, if you remember, we were coalitions in the fighter community. In the Guard, you paired up with other Guard units and deployed with them as you filled that aviation package as a coalition, and ours was the Rocky Mountain Coalition. Mm-hmm. So it was us and Colorado and New Mexico. We were all F-16s. And that was 2004. Went to Iraq. We were the first F-16s into Iraq after that war started. Mm. And that was an experience. Being the first wing to operate out of their, fighter aircraft. So, because it was basically a base that used to be Iraq's air base, and that got heavily damaged, and then we were reconstituting it, making it our own base, to meet those objectives that were out there. But that was an experience. I think one of the cool things I remember about it initially was, first was going in there and not knowing what to expect. I mean, it's your first time going to real war, it's like that. It was just a rush of feeling. I mean, I can't even explain it. It's sort of weird, but it's amazing how the training and all the things that you've been through just kick in. It's like I wasn't that nervous, but you've done it. I mean, most of us have done it, and but it was still an amazing experience. And going in at night on a C-130, lights out, night vision goggles, and then they kick you off the plane with the props still around. I'm like, okay, it's real. You know what I mean?
Right.
They don't even shut the airplane down.
Mm-hmm.
Get out. Because at the time, there's mortars coming in.
Yeah.
So, but the coolest thing was how the other joint forces that were there, be it, foreign or, our NATO partners or the Army, Marines, whomever, that base was more than an air base. It was a joint base. And them, when they saw the F-16 show up and we're making the low passes, and I mean, we started, dropping bombs fairly quickly, they were just ecstatic to have us there because they didn't have that air support. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool. And that, to me personally, that, knowing how ecstatic and happy those ground troops were to have us there just fueled the fire more for me to just, let's get this done, Mm-hmm. But it was definitely experience, no running water, trying to, like you were saying earlier, being ready to, I remember you telling me, it's not just plan A, B, you got to think about C, D, and E and all that. I mean, at that time, we were working in this building and made it ops, and I mean, I'm doing oxygen masks out of 5-gallon Home Depot buckets. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a sink. Right. Those kind of things, which those stories, and I know a lot of people that had to do that. And yeah, it was a heck of an experience, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at your T-shirt, the Vigilantes.
Oh, yeah.
The number on there.
Yeah.
Thought I'd just ask you about that.
Okay. By the way, Reagan Robertson, who we were talking about earlier, he made this, by the way.
He was a great artist.
Yeah, he's artistic. He's talented, that guy.
Yeah. He also made the aircrew flight equipment, pilot's hands in flight gloves with the triangle.
Oh, with the 3 legs.
Aircrew
Yep.
training and quality assurance, the things to bring our crew feel together.
That's right.
He did that artwork for us, and
That's
we used that as a logo for many years, at least in the Guard.
Yeah. So the Vigilantes, that's basically what our wing is now. It originally started with our fighter squadron being the Vigilantes, but it's a Montana history-based thing because on the all the state patrol cars, highway patrol here, there's a 3777 on every single one of them, on every highway patrol car. And what it is in Montana history is way back when Montana was, prior to becoming an official state, Bannock down south of here, it's sort of by Dillon, Montana. There was a corrupt sheriff that took over the town, and him and his crew were corrupt, which the citizens didn't obviously take well to that. They're supposed to be for the people, not against the people, right? So he was a corrupt sheriff, and I mean, anybody can Google the history. Don't use Wikipedia, use Google. The population, basically the civilians, not the sheriff and his posse folks that were corrupt, took the law into their own hands and got rid of them. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always stuck in Montana history because it was at a time when they didn't know what the state capital was going to be and all these things. And Bannock was originally, I mean, I'd have to even go back to the books to find it because I think Bannock might have even been the capital for a little bit, but I'd have to go back and review the history. But anyhow, the 3777 piece, there's a lot of mystery to it. If you actually research and Google it, there's a lot of different definitions of where it came from or theories. Because honestly, to this day, it's not 100% known. I mean, factual 100%,
right,
that I'm aware of. And so there's different takes on it, but the biggest belief or theory is back in those Bannock days when they were getting rid of that corrupt sheriff, they basically, if you got home or any part of your property and you saw 3777 like etched on there, written on your house or your door or your horse, whatever, you knew you were supposed to get out of town or else you might not make it to the next day. And they supposedly, it's the dimensions of a grave. That's where that's one of the most well-known theories, I guess. But there's other theories too about it's how many people were involved and different things. But it's good history to look up and research.
Yeah.
But Montana took that to heart primarily because that did happen. There was 3777s. The true meaning of what that means, but it was actually on people's houses and property, and that's how you were warned to leave before they did something more.
Yeah.
Before they took the next step. Yeah.
Well, and if it's on the cop cars or high patrol cars, you could Google and specifically go down that line of questioning too.
Right.
On what do they think
Right.
of,
Right.
and so why it's on their
Right.
vehicles. So yeah,
but it has become a big staple of Montana. That's where it comes from. It's a Montana thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a little bit more Montana history you were showing me over there on the bar. back to your grandfather's papers
Oh yeah.
that you were showing me
Yeah.
last night. I want you to explain some of that stuff that
Yeah.
you acquired.
Yeah. So yeah, when we were having our adult cocktail last night, I pulled out. I got I believe my aunt had the paperwork, but I ended up getting my hands on my grandfather's original training certificates, like when he graduated from and officially became a crew chief on a P-61 Black Widow back in Army Air Corps days. I actually have the original paperwork in really good shape, honestly, for how many years ago it was.
Amazingly good shapes. Like it's not even like turning yellow or anything.
Well, I think my grandmother had it all filed away real good or something. And well, then my aunt ended up with it and she gave it to my dad and then he in turn gave it to me. But yeah, and I got a training certificate in there from Northrop when he went through all that training, his official discharge and honorable discharge paper, all that. It was really cool to get my hands on because it was always I got a picture of him. It's been in my office for years. Him with his squadron right next to the Black Widow aircraft. It was a night tactical airplane, first of its kind back then, I guess. Able to actually do the mission at night. And what I thought was cool back then, and I didn't know, and he told me, I said, "What's with the dog, Grandpa?" There was a dog in the front row in the corner with the guy. He's like, "Oh, every squadron had a dog." I'm like, "Really?"
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. So I can't remember his name though. He told me his name, but I can't remember it. But yeah, that's each squadron. They had a squadron dog, I guess. I don't know. At least down there they did. That was in California where he was at the time.
Yeah.
But no, very cool getting that historical paperwork and having that to where I can continue to preserve it and, probably pass it on to my kids, and your great grandpa, I don't know if my kids will end up in the military or not, but still it's that history, that original history is pretty cool, especially knowing that I'm joined the Air Force just like he did. Yeah.
Yeah, it would
Cool,
have been
cool stuff to get.
We talked last night too on but how this got started. I watch a guy down in Texas and just different podcasts, and there's a bunch of Navy SEALs out there that have podcasts with some pretty high test stories. But just it would have been cool for you to have something of your grandfather's video wise, hearing your voice and all stuff. But the paperwork is awesome. I mean, that's all you got.
Yeah.
And I've got some of that from my family as well. And it's pretty cool. But it's even cooler to be able to hear your ancestors' voices and stuff. So
Yeah.
and I've asked this of a few people, if your great grandkids were sitting down there in front of that camera like this, watching this right now, what would you want to say to them?
Oh, wow. My great grandkids?
Yeah.
Oof. I'm still busy raising my own kids.
Because the Hog House Chronicles is going to live forever. Right.
Right.
Whatever.
I know that I would pass on one thing I'll never forget my grandfather passed on to me. And then probably a couple other things. The first thing I would probably tell him, obviously depending upon how old they were sitting there, but I'm going to assume they're old enough to understand, is I would tell them don't be afraid of failing. I'd tell them that. Because failure is what makes us better, in my opinion. If you're perfect or always doing great at something, you're not going to ultimately learn what it takes to do the best job at anything you're doing. I think you have to fail at things to get better. I've failed at things. I'm assuming you probably have too.
Many times.
I would say do not be afraid to fail. It just makes you better. I would tell them to follow their gut. I've told a lot of people that over the years, and I'm not that old yet. I mean, I'm getting there, but 50 something.
Like we said, you're still in the service. So.
Yeah. Just because I'm in the guard, probably. I would ensure that they understood how to follow their gut, because it'll get them a long ways in life. Your gut knows what's right and wrong. Usually, you don't need people to tell you most of the time. Your internal, you'll tell yourself usually, at least the majority of life experiences. And then what my grandfather passed on to me that I'll never forget, it's like nothing huge or philosophical in any way. He, and I can't remember where we were at. We were driving somewhere, maybe to go shooting or something. And, not hunting, but going to a range. I can't remember. I think we were going shooting, because I remember it was on a dirt road. I was pretty young. He said, he goes, Bobby, I'm going to tell you a key to life. He says, take care of your eyes, your hands, and your feet. And, I'm like, what?
Got it, Grandpa.
I'm like,
But
okay,
it was a deeper deal, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, but then he said it again, and I was like, okay. And, I was pretty young, but it's stuck with me my whole life. Mm-hmm. And what's really funny, knock on wood, I've never broke a bone. I've never had problems with my hands, my feet, my eye, nothing. And I don't know if it's just because he said it way back then, and I've like subconsciously tell myself to. So I would pass that on to my grandkids, I guess, because it's something that I don't know why. And maybe that's why I like the safety thing. I don't know.
Right. Well, the core matters, but your extremities.
Yeah,
that
he goes,
matters a
you
lot
can,
too, in your
you
eyes.
can get. And he expanded on it a little bit, I think, when he was telling me, like, you can, hurt this or that or this, but if you ever get problems with your feet or your hands or your eye, if you lose. There's so many people, they lose the use of one of their eyes or both or feet. It truly affects your life. Right. So it was just something that stuck with me. I don't know why, but it did.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of times working with mobility packages and things, forklifts, 10K forklifts. I saw one guy he was really tired. We had worked a really, really long day, which consisted of multiple days. And there was a forklift being run, and there was a D-ring that had just caught on a pallet that was being sat down.
Yep.
And he just didn't like seeing that thing on there. And the weight was coming down slowly, and he put his finger in there and flipped it out. And then it dropped just enough to smash his finger just right on the end, and just being tired. I'm very careful with those three things in particular as well, and all the safety stuff we do at work and at home. Just got to be careful with everything. But that's some good advice, because you start with those three and then you can expand.
Yeah, and I don't know where he was a supervisor in the mines. That was his job. He grew up mining in Butte, and he was there's a picture. I don't know if I showed you that picture. I'll do that before we leave, but I got a picture of him. If you think our offices sucked, you should see what his desk and office was, a mile under the ground or whatever. But I think it stemmed from that too, because that's probably what he was. That's how he mentored the young guys that worked for him, and make sure that they took care of all that stuff so that they could go home every day to their families from the mines, because that's like going to war every day.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I stopped in Wallace, Idaho, just needed a break, and there happened to be a mining museum there. It was pretty dang cool, but the working conditions were pretty bad.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I would tell my grandkids or great grandkids, I would tell them, it's about family, and I've got a lot of people I know and a lot of friends, and it seems like we all have dysfunction within our families. It's just life, right? But you can't let it take you to the point to where it, severs those bonds, I guess is the best way to put it. And I would impose upon them to work hard to stay close with your family, and even through, those tough times. And, like me and my 3 brothers, there's 4 of us, and I've had some really good friends of mine tell me they're jealous of the relationship we have because they don't have it with their siblings. Mm-hmm. Us 4 brothers, we talk every day, not on the phone, but with text messaging and stuff. Every single day we usually talk to each other.
Wow.
All 4 of us.
Yeah, that is unusual.
Yeah, we have a brother's text string that almost every day. Some days it's just sharing what we got on Wordle, that game, guessing the word. But usually we're talking about something every day, and we always share things about what we're doing because we don't all. 3 of us actually live in Great Falls and 1's in Idaho, but yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Fairly close then.
Yeah, pretty close. And it's just because I've seen some families not be that way, and I don't know what I would do if I didn't have that. That really, if that disappeared.
Yeah.
I've heard of brothers and sisters and dads and sons and, not talking for years.
And sometimes with siblings, when parents pass away, sometimes things can go sour. And
right.
You just got to have the coalition to say, not going to happen.
Right.
Yep. We're not going to take anything with us when we leave here, so let's put our egos at the door.
Exactly. Because it matters down the road. It matters. Helping and supporting each other, because we all get faced with hard times, and you need that support. Yeah.
Okay. Well, through the talks here, can you think of anything we missed at all, or we missed Reagan being here?
Yeah, I wish Reagan could have been there. That would have been fun. Let's get some of his experience. I mean, you got to get him on this deal though, because he's got some experiences that are pretty cool, and about some of them when he was in the Army.
Yeah. We'll just got to rig a C-130 trip to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and he can be loadmaster on that.
There you go. Yeah.
Come 25 miles south to my place.
Oh, you'll catch him on here and get him on. I mean, it was cool he's a real cowboy like you. I'm not a cowboy at all.
Oh, he's the real deal.
Well,
I told you. I told you this morning I sweetened my coffee, so I'm not a real cowboy.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, right.
Well, I got something on you at least. I drink black coffee.
Yeah, I do at church, but in small spurts.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, story about him actually, real quick. When my wife and I started dating, he had just moved up and got hired in our shop, and he took us out horseback riding out here in some ranch or something that I don't know if it was a relative or a friend or something.
He told me I think his grandpa has a large ranch north of Great Falls, but he didn't tell me how far
it
north.
could have been what it was, or maybe some other relative. But anyhow, that was a real cool experience because my wife loves horses, and I mean, I don't mind them, but it was just cool to take her on a date horseback riding. It was sort of a surprise to her, and maybe that's why she married me, because I haven't taken her horseback riding. Well, she might have got on your horse once, but
yeah.
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. I mean, I wouldn't have done anything, all this military stuff we're talking about, and how I'm still doing it, and I couldn't have done any of it without the support of my wife and having my 2 kids. Mm-hmm. That just changes the whole game without their support, and because moving out east was a big deal, and but it was a great deal, and without them, I wouldn't have been able to do any of it solo, I don't think, without that support.
Well, if you can't always do it, but your family understands. But when you come home, you flip that switch, and it's family time here, and we're going to support that by watching some volleyball in
that's right.
3-4 hours.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we're we'll call her quits and pack this stuff up. But thanks a ton for agreeing to do this. I know you're a little hesitant and you didn't think you had much of a story to tell, but I knew better than that. You know, they don't have to be all the Medal of Honor type stories overseas and all that.
Yeah.
But because there are, I mean, if you have, like at home, a squadron of F-16s, and you have well over 1,000 people it takes to keep those babies flying, and a lot of those people have done a lot of amazing things. So
Yeah.
that's what we're searching for on the Chronicles here.
Well,
so.
I didn't feel worthy to even be on here, so.
Well, you've been in the hog house multiple
I know
times.
I've been there
so.
multiple times, but my chapter's not retired yet. So,
Right.
but no, it's been a heck of an experience, and this doesn't surprise me at all. What you're doing, man, this is very cool. And you took it to the moon. You turned my house into, like I said, a studio. It's pretty cool.
It was fun.
Thanks for always being one of my best mentors too.
Oh, thank you.
You were one of them, man. I don't have very many either, and you're one of them. So,
well, thanks. Appreciate that.
You bet, Jimbo.
All right.
Appreciate it, bud.
You bet. Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
How the heck long did we just talk?
An hour, well, including some of our prep time, an hour and 34 minutes.
Holy crap.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom.
It doesn't seem like that, does it?
Nope. That's why sometimes when I'm looking over here, sometimes I'm switching over to the sound effects, which we got one in there.
You did get one in there, yeah.
And, but then looking at the levels, see if I need to adjust anything, and the time.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
That is crazy.
Here we go. Record off.